Right you are. Thank you very much. Right, I'd like to welcome you all to this virtual meeting of the Policy and Resources Select Committee. This meeting is being webcast on YouTube via the County Council website. I'll begin by reading the names of members of the committee so they can confirm their attendance for the public record. Members, please unmute and confirm your attendance when your name is called so we can ensure you can be heard. During the meeting, if any of you wish to speak, then you indicate this by raising your hand and I'll ask you then to speak in turn. So, members, I'll start with myself. I'm Councillor Jonathan Glenn, Chairman of the Policy and Resources Committee. Right, Councillor Adam Carew, are you there? All right, come back to that. Councillor Fran Carpenter.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Collett.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Huckstep.
Present, Chairman.
Very good. Councillor Peter Latham.
Present, Chairman.
Very good. Councillor Anna McNair-Scott.
I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Kirsty North.
Present, Chairman.
Right, Kirsty, you need to up your mic. Okay.
Present, Chairman.
That's much better. All right. Councillor Russell Oppenheimer.
Good morning, Chairman. I am present.
Thank you, Russell. Councillor Jackie Porter. I know you're here.
Good morning, present.
Councillor Bruce Tennant.
Present, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Michael Westbrook.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Bill Withers.
Present, Chairman.
And finally, Councillor Andrew Gibson,
Present.
who is attending as a substitute for the late Keith Evans.
Sorry, Chairman, before you carry on, could I ask you to put your camera on?
My camera should be on.
Okay.
My camera's on.
You've just turned it off, Mr. Chairman.
So it was on before, was it?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Well, thank you, Louise.
Sorry, it's not appearing on my screen, sorry.
I can
So-
see you now, Chairman.
That's a good start. Okay.
Sorry.
I can't.
Louise, you're meant to be here to help me.
I think it's a team thing.
Mr. Chairman, Andrew's here. Andrew's here now.
Andrew.
Carew.
Oh, good. Right. So, Adam Carew, are you present?
I am, Chairman.
Right. Thank you for coming.
We still
Okay,
can't see you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
We still can't see you.
I can see you.
I can see you
Yes, I can see you.
I can't.
Me neither.
just as well.
Wonderful. Right. Let's go on. I'll just put it on and off. Okay. That's off. And that's on.
I can see you now.
Yeah.
We see you.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, isn't this meeting going well? I'd also like to welcome to the meeting Councillor Keith Manns, the leader of the council. Keith, are you there? And executive.
Yes, I am. I may have to leave before the end of the meeting, Jonathan, but I will stay with you as long as I can.
Thank you for that. We only have one major item, and I imagine there'll be a lot of discussion, but I don't expect this one to go on too long. Okay. And Councillor Stephen Reid, the executive member for commercial strategy, human resources, and other.
Morning, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay. I'd like to remind members that the Constitution standing orders will apply, so please keep your microphone muted unless you have been called to speak, and that you may be visible on the screen to the public and to other members, even when you're not speaking. Right, Louise, apologies for absence. I don't think we have any, do we?
No, we don't, Chairman.
Excellent. Right, are there any declarations of interest, personal or pecuniary, which you might want to mention now or later in the meeting? Please do so, okay? Right, minutes of the previous meeting. So just put them up, please. Okay, now this refers to the meeting of the Policy and Resources Select Committee on the 19th of January. I'll just go through for accuracy. That's page 3 is the first page. Page 4. Page 5. And page 6. So we're all happy with the accuracy. Are there any points arising that anybody wants to bring up from those minutes, or can we accept them as correct? Let's just have a...
Agreed.
Everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, right, thank you very much. We'll take that as agreed. Thank you, Louise.
I think Councillor Porter's got a hand raised, Chairman.
All right, Councillor Porter, yeah.
Thank you. I didn't get it quite up in time. We're going to be discussing some of the open reach works. Oh, my screen keeps disappearing. Sorry about this, Chairman. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. Can you?
Yes.
Can I declare an interest because I'm a member of one of the schemes that we're going to be discussing this morning. So
Right.
I have a potentially personal interest, but it's so small in the total that I don't think it's pecuniary at this point.
Right, you are. Thank you very much for that. Right, on to 4 deputations. I don't believe we have any, correct, Louise?
We don't, Chairman.
Okay, moving along swiftly. Announcements. Right, I just want to say this is the last meeting, the last Policy and Resources Select meeting before the May elections. So I think it's worth just saying a couple of words about this. I am aware that some of us are standing down, either by choice or by reselection procedure. So therefore, as chairman, and on behalf of all the county councillors and officers, I'd like to thank you all genuinely for all that you have done, especially those who are not returning, and for your committee service to scrutiny over the last few years. In addition, I'd also like to thank all the remainder of you for your committee service, and I look forward to resuming normal services from May onwards. I say this right across the political spectrum. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our staff and leading officers for all their support over the last 4 years on this committee, especially Louise Pickford. I'd like to thank you all for attending today, especially 24 hours after a very important budget, and with all of us dealing right now with the eventual shutdown of the county work, for us that is as councillors, until May. And in addition, I'd like to pay tribute to you all for the way you have adapted over the last 12 months, owing to the effect the pandemic has had on the way we do business. I think we've adapted to this, and I think so has everybody else on the council. That is all I have to say in terms of Chairman's remarks. So we come to item 6, which is our main item. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Bruce Tennant for a great deal of research that he did on behalf of the of our committee, helping us with contacts and information, which has proved to be very useful. So, Councillor Tennant, thank you very much. I'm sure he's still there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that nod.
Okay. Right, we have today, we basically have 2 presentations. The first is from Patrick Blogg, who is our Assistant Director for Transformation, and Glenn PC, the Broadband Programme Director. The second part of the presentation comes from Connie Dixon, the Partnership Director for Openreach. She's the Partnership Director for Wales and West of England, and helping her is Stephen Harris, the Partnership Manager for Berkshire, Hampshire, the Isle of Wight and Wiltshire. I presume that they're all present. I'd like to welcome you all here today. Now, the plan here is that after we will start with the presentation from Hampshire County Council, and we can, at that point when they've finished, we'll have questions and answers to those questions. Really, it's about clarification and anything maybe that hasn't been understood. Because I'd like to get on to the OpenReach presentation as quickly as possible. And then after that, we will have questions and answers for clarification and such like. And then we can go into debate, where we can cover both presentations at the same time. Because what I want to avoid is a big debate going on when we haven't heard the second presentation. So I may try and move this into the second presentation. So if you get missed out, please don't worry. You can bring your questions into the debate later. Is everybody happy with that as a process? So I would like to I'd like to ask Patrick Blogg and Glenn Peacey to step up to the plate and do the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. I'm Patrick Blogg, and I'm joined by Glenn Peacey, who's the Programme Director for Broadband. Before we go into the presentation, what I'd just like to do is just say a few words by way of introduction, if I may. I suppose the first point is there's always been a huge amount and significant interest in broadband, but never has it been brought into such sharp focus as we've seen through the course of the pandemic. Everything from homeschooling through to online retail and indeed the way we work now. Now, we've been involved in the delivery of broadband infrastructure in Hampshire since 2013. And I think at this time, due to market failure, the expectation of coverage across the area is around 80% without public subsidy. But with our programme, what we've been able to do is take this coverage up to 97%, and in that process, upgrading around 120,000 premises. But one of the challenges is that it's always been a very complex and indeed continues to be a very complex programme. That's both technically, with the funding arrangements, with state aid, with regulation, and because of the numerous stakeholders and parties involved in the programme itself. And I think what that leads to is often confusion over the roles and responsibilities for the respective parties. Who's responsible for what in terms of central government, local government, and the infrastructure providers. So that will be a bit of a thread that runs through the presentations today. So this morning, what I'd like to do and what we'd like to do is give you an update on the programme itself and what's been delivered and where. We're going to talk about what areas are remaining, how we've been able to support and provide some top-up funding to the Gigabit Voucher Scheme. And what we'll try and do is outline some of the government's emerging plans to get 100% gigabit-enabled coverage across the country and indeed across Hampshire, and how we are seeking to influence that and work with government on their procurements using our local knowledge and the experience we've brought to bear to date. And then we'll be handing over to hear from OpenReach. And as you've said, Chairman, we've got Connie Dixon, the Partnership Director for OpenReach, and also Stephen Harris, the Partnership Manager, who are going to give an update on that presentation. So if I may, I'm going to hand over to our Programme Director, Glenn Peacey, to take us through the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Chairman. My name's Glenn Peacey, and I know most of you, I think, via email, if not by face. So it's nice to see so many of you here. I will now share my screen so that you can see some slides. Can I just check that that's, yeah, that seems to be working. Is that good? Okay. So the first thing I just wanted to cover off is that actually the pandemic has been quite a remarkable thing for the internet. The internet has always been important, but kind of overnight, everybody has accelerated the trends that were already there. So wishing to work from home, use Teams, use Zoom, stream content from the iPlayer and Netflix and Amazon and the myriad other streaming services that are out there. And it's all worked seamlessly, really. The internet hasn't fallen over. The connections have still remained working, and there are definitely some people who don't have the speed that they would like, but everybody has still remained connected. So I think given that huge increase in traffic almost overnight from March last year, I think that's something that we should probably just take into account really, and consider as in terms of the overall resilience, the infrastructure that has been deployed so far. The first slide I've put up here is just from the Ofcom Connected Nations report. They issue a report in December each year. Sometimes they miss a year, but they have since about 2017 been issuing these reports, which give a summary of the UK as a whole. And they reported that nationally, at the end of last year, 96% coverage across the UK for superfast broadband, and that's measured at 30 megabits by Ofcom. In our programme and in all programmes across the UK that are publicly funded at the moment, they're all measured at 24 megabits a second. So it's just worth being aware of that slight difference. It only makes about half a percentage point difference in terms of overall coverage in Hampshire. So it's just a development over time that it started off at 24 megs and now we've decided that 30 is the threshold. The second, and this is a really relevant point, is that Ofcom estimates that around 60% of premises that get superfast broadband actually have superfast broadband, i.e. they've actually bought a superfast product. So there's 36% of the total UK infrastructure that aren't taking advantage of the speeds that they could have if they wanted it. And there's a number of reasons for that, it seems. One is not understanding what's available to them. The other one is a desire. So not everybody actually wants the stuff. But I think that and of course cost. And some people do struggle. There was a report out just before Christmas that identified around 1/5 of UK households find it difficult to afford broadband connectivity. So that is something that does need to be considered. And of course, there will be a few people who don't have the skills. Quite a lot of people actually who don't have the skills to take up superfast broadband. They don't have a laptop, those kinds of things. So there are a number of things there. But I think it's really interesting that, given that there's 96% coverage, there's over of conventional broadband, there's over 90% take up, and yet for superfast broadband, it's only at 60%, which just seems a bit low. So I think there is some work for everyone to do there. At the end of last year, and I think these figures were taken in September, 5.1 million homes, that's 18%, have access to full fibre connection, and that's an increase of 2.1 million on the year before. I think I was just looking at the Think Broadband Labs stats, which are pretty reliable, and they suggest that the figure's now over 20%. So the deployment of full fibre is a big project, and there's a lot of work underway to make it happen in the commercial sector, both from Openreach and other suppliers. I'm sure Openreach will talk about that separately. Over and above full fibre, so we have Virgin Media's network out there as well. That is capable of delivering gigabit capable connections, but it's not full fibre, it's a coax cable into the house. But 27%, 7.9 million homes have been upgraded to the gigabit capable connections over their network. So there's full fibre is wonderful. It's not the only thing out there that can deliver gigabit capable connections. So sometimes we just have to look more widely at what figures and what speeds are actually available for people. The next slide is just a summary of really what Patrick introduced, which is our programme started in 2013 when the government decided that we should be looking at intervening to increase superfast broadband coverage, having identified that the market would only reach 80% coverage. And in some areas, it was even lower than that, sort of 65, 66%. The government estimates that for full fibre, we're likely to see the same scenario return. So it's likely to be the same 20% that we didn't reach, that wasn't reached commercially last time, that are going to be the recipients of government support to make it happen for full fibre. But just to give you an idea of the timeline, we started in 2013 with 80%. We let a programme, £11 million programme with Openreach to take us to 90% by the end of 2015. That was upgrading 64,500 properties. We then embarked on the 90 to 95% programme, and that was nationally funded to reach 95%. So we've that resulted in the upgrade to about 34,500 properties. We managed to recycle some money out of the second contract, and there was a significant underspend in the first contract. And as a result of that, we were able to extend the contracts with another £6.8 million to reach 8,500 properties to bring us over the 96% figure. And currently we're on track for, across Hampshire as a whole, 97% availability of superfast. So it's been a big programme. It was funded to reach 95%. We've reached more than 95%, but of course that does mean that there are properties that haven't been upgraded. And of course, now that we're in the times that we're in, and the digital infrastructure has become even more important than we all probably thought it was in the first place, the 30,000 or so properties that haven't been upgraded to superfast are of course quite concerned about that. And it's noticeable that they have been left behind, as it were, and they are making a lot of noise about it, which is fair enough. The government has introduced a thing called the Gigabit Voucher Scheme in the interim while they work out how to do the main national procurements for the Gigabit ambition. We topped that up with a £1 million match funding scheme. Sorry, not match funding, a £1 million top up. And that has proved very successful. And I'll come on to some more details about the numbers in the next couple of slides. But I just wanted to give you a sort of timeline and chronology of how the project has worked, where we've got to, and why we haven't got 100% coverage, because I think it's really important to understand that that was a government policy. It's not that we have at any point deliberately excluded any particular properties. It's just how far the funding will actually go. And actually we've extended it beyond the original target. So coming on to that, we have delivered 103,117 premises with superfast. The thing that is probably most noticeable, though, is that we have, in addition to that, delivered 11,854, and there are more to come, full fibre connections. So actually a significant proportion of the overall full fibre connections in the county have actually come from our programme. So the ability to switch the technology within the contract without having to relet the contract or do anything like that is a significant benefit, really, and it's allowed us to develop over into the full fibre technology. I think, in particular, the full fibre technology has been most effective in our most rural areas. So areas where the old-fashioned copper wires just can't support, because of the distances involved between point A and point B, just can't support the speeds that are required. Full fibre has been the answer, yeah. So we've reached nearly 12,000. I think we will breach 12,000 by the end of the programme. The main programme is finished, so we've pretty much, by the end of the next quarter, we will have finished the delivery of all of the main infrastructure, except for the New Forest, where there are around about 800 properties that we have still to complete, and that's for a number of reasons, which I won't go into in great detail here, but around the number of stakeholders and the protected nature of the New Forest, which just makes it very difficult to operate in. But we're very pleased that we've not had to drop those. We're just continuing to work through them over a prolonged period of time. What I've put together now is just a couple of slides that perhaps you'll want to refer back to at a later date, but it just shows the breakdown of the number of FTTP properties and the number of superfast properties that we have delivered as part of the superfast programme by each individual district within the county. And similarly, this is from the Ofcom Connected Nations report, and it shows by county the total number of premises, the number of premises with superfast, the number of premises with 100 megs, so that's ultra fast, the number of properties with full ultra fast, which is sort of gigabit capable, frankly, and then the number of properties with full fibre. So there are 62,000 properties across the whole county that have access to full fibre connections, and 93,000 that have access to gigabit capable. So that's including the Virgin Media network, which isn't FTTP, but does offer gigabit capable connections, as well as some of the suppliers that are also out there. So the picture is much better than it was a couple of years ago, and you can see the kind of the levels of increase that the market is making into those areas, but that is in the commercially viable areas, and of course the last 20% is where our problems lie. So where are those 30,000 properties that we mentioned earlier? The map here just gives you an outline. Each dot, each grey star, is a postcode that has a property with less than 30 megs in it. There are 30,000 properties, maybe 2,000 postcodes, and as you can see, that's across the whole county. So it's pretty much in every ward, every parish, and certainly every district. So it's a challenge. It's not just a little cluster of 30,000 houses around Basingstoke or something. It literally is spread out everywhere, and it's typically the fringes of villages, fringes of towns, where the most difficult properties that we haven't been able to upgrade to superfast are to be found. So, as part of a way to fix that, the government launched the Gigabit Voucher Scheme. Which originally started with £1,500 per property as a support grant and £3,500 for an SME. The county councils topped that up and increased the residential grant to £3,000 overall by adding £1,500. There are currently 26 projects underway with 2,800 properties due to be upgraded if they all go through, totaling more than £3 million worth of investment. So the voucher scheme has been a really successful project. It's drawing to a close. The government closes the current programme down at the end of March, and it closed to new applicants in February 19th. There is due to be a new scheme in April, but we don't know the details of that yet. We keep being told it'll be released any minute now, but other things seem to get in the way. So we're expecting details of that scheme in due course. It has been hugely successful, but there are some operational difficulties, I would say, in terms of trying to coordinate lots of communities. You may have one community with 3, 4 or 5 different projects underway. So kind of coordinating all of that and helping Openreach to spot the ones that could be combined into one bigger project is a task in itself. The scheme, the funding levels, have helped considerably with overcoming the issue around the 60% take-up, really. So it might be that for an entire village, if everybody was to take up the service, then it would only be £1,000 or £1,500 per property to do the upgrade. But if only 60% of people or 50% of people are willing to take up the voucher, then you can't get to that number. You can't achieve the overall income that you need to pay for the scheme. So by having a voucher value, a higher voucher value, you need fewer people to sign up for the scheme. So it's really helped in those communities where, you know, there may be an older population, there may be people with income constraints and so on, who are just not interested in it, but there are significant numbers of people who are, and this kind of smooths out that gap. So it's been very helpful in that regard, and we need to look more widely at the number of properties upgraded as opposed to the number of vouchers that are claimed, to kind of understand that scheme and its impact. So where are we in terms of the government's plans and ambitions for 100%? Now, they earlier last year, I think it was, government had originally proposed that there would be 100% gigabit capable coverage by the end of 2025. That ambition has been scaled back a bit, and now the current target is 85% coverage with gigabit capable connections by 2025. Across the UK as a whole, they expect that 20% of properties are not going to be upgraded by commercial investments. So that's been dubbed the F20, and you may see that phrase knocking around in various publications. It has other names as well, the UK Gigabit programme, for instance, but the overall banner is the F20, and then there are a number of different projects within that come in under that, including 5G and so on. So in Hampshire, to give you an idea, when we started the programme in 2013, there was about 590,000 properties. Now we're at a position where there's 633,000 properties. So, there's been lots of house building going on and business properties and all that kind of stuff. So the F20 for us has grown now to about 126,000 properties across the county in terms of the next gigabit activity. And what we are waiting to hear from government is exactly how they want to do that. We know that it's going to be a combination of supply side interventions with procurements. We don't know the scale of those procurements yet or the timing. So we're obviously lobbying DCMS, which is the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, to get Hampshire as close to the top of that list as possible. But we just don't know yet where we're going to sit in that list. The good indications from DCMS so far are that they are very keen to just get on with rolling through the procurements as quickly as possible. So it's not going to be kind of do 10, wait a year, do another 10, wait a year. It's going to be a treadmill or a conveyor belt of procurements that just roll from start to finish. So they're keen to get those procurements underway as rapidly as possible. If we're not in the first round, then we'll be in a subsequent one as soon as possible after that. We're continuing to work with them on that front. We know that they are keen to continue with the voucher schemes, and we know that they have earmarked some money from the £1.2 billion of the £5 billion that's been allocated by Treasury for gigabit upgrades to the vouchers. So we know that there is a new voucher scheme, but as these things go, we don't know what the terms of that new scheme are going to be yet. I just thought I'd leave with a timeline that just gives a bit of context for where we are as Hampshire and where the UK is as a whole. So on the left there, we've got in 2013 when we started out with the 80% superfast coverage in Hampshire, 90% 2016, 95% by 2018. We're heading up to 97% now. BDUK is projecting to start procurements for the £1.2 billion that they've had released to them by Treasury in 2021. But as I say, we don't quite know when that's going to impact Hampshire. They are projecting that there will be UK 4G coverage at 95% by the end of next year, 2022, and that by 2025 there will be 85% FTTP coverage across the UK. That's our ambition. They are also talking about being a 5G world leader by 2027. Not quite sure yet whether that's coverage or take up, or we'll have to wait and see how that pans out, or usage. And with an aim for 100% FTTP coverage by the end of 2033. On that regard, I would just say that whilst we're at 97% coverage and clearly 30,000 properties left to do is still a big task, and we certainly shouldn't be complacent about those 30,000. The UK as a whole has the highest spend online per head of any country globally. Overall spending, with third behind China and the USA. So although we need to upgrade our infrastructure, the level of take up and the level of usage of the internet is really we're ahead of the pack there in quite a lot of activity. So it needs to improve, but it's not all bad. Certainly in terms of usage and exploitation. So I'd just like to leave on that point really, and hand back to you, Chairman, for questions.
Right, Glenn and also Patrick, thank you very much indeed, both of you. I really just want to use this period for any questions, really, to clarify anything that Glenn has said, or to let's say understand something on a slide. If you've got a complicated question, which might involve much wider area of discussion, I'd like to leave that till after the second presentation, okay? So please try and work that out for yourselves, members. I'm going to start with my own question. The initials FTTP obviously stand for something Fibre Technology Program, is that right?
That stands for fibre to the premise.
Fibre to the premise, okay.
Yeah, so it indicates that there's a fibre currently. Superfast broadband is delivered via the old copper wires. So from a box in the street, they reuse the copper wire into your house, and that might be a distance of 1,000 meters or so. Full fibre, FTTP, fibre to the premise, replaces that copper wire with a fibre that comes all the way into your house, and that means that you don't experience any loss over the distance. So the fibre can be 150 meters long, 200 meters long, 1,000 meters long. It makes no difference. The speed will be the same at the far end when it's plugged into your house, and therefore the product that you buy, if it's 50 meg, 100 meg, 200 meg, 500 megs, whatever, will be that speed. So it doesn't encounter any loss.
Okay, thank you. And that's a reminder for the OpenReach presenters. If you've got any acronyms, would you please make sure that they're spelled out to us at the beginning? Okay, it's not just for us. There may be members of the public listening in. Right, I think we have the first questions coming from Roger Huckstep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question for Glenn. It's clarification. On page 10, which is really his first substantive slide, he says superfast broadband is available. Can we just be clear what available means? Does it mean it's actually connected into a household and is operational?
Okay, thank you. Is available means that a customer could buy it if they want to. So rather like the 97% availability but only 60% take up, it means that the service is available to 97% but only 60% have bought something.
You want to come back at that, Roger?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. And the second one, Jackie Porter.
Thank you. In all my conversations with Glenn, we've always really been discussing OpenReach as the main supplier of the infrastructure. What work has Hampshire County Council and Glenn and the team been doing with other providers? And would you like to comment on that? And the second question was, you mentioned that we have the highest spend per head on broadband. Is that because we use it more or because ours costs more?
Thank you. I'll answer the last one first, if I may. Sorry, it's spend online. So our broadband is amongst the cheapest in the world because we have so much competition at a retail level. But the amount we spend online, so with Amazon, John Lewis, and all that, is over £4,000 a head, which is the highest spend per capita for any of the G20.
So you make the most use of it in that sense. Okay.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
In terms of other suppliers, obviously our main contract is with OpenReach, and they were the only company to bid, not just for Hampshire but nationally, for the contracts from 2013 onwards, for the big contracts. We are seeing some smaller suppliers coming in to take advantage of the voucher scheme, and that's really to be welcomed. There is a project to the north of the county near Borkhurst, which is run by the Hampshire Broadband Company, and they're delivering some 500 properties with full fibre connections, and they're taking advantage of the voucher scheme currently. There is another scheme which I don't think is actually launched yet, but is in development somewhere near Petersfield, and that's for another sort of 300, 400 properties. And we had some interest from Gigabit originally, but they've had to consolidate other activities, I think, so they haven't built anything in Hampshire yet. There's another company called Wessex Internet, and they are also building in parts of Hampshire. They're primarily to be found in Dorset and Wiltshire, but they're interested in crossing over the border. And we talk to them regularly about that, and we supply details to them of where the gaps are so that they can have a look at those. And again, they take advantage of the voucher scheme. So there are definitely other suppliers out there. City Fibre being another one, of course, based in Portsmouth currently, and Tube based in Southampton, although Tube have pretty categorically said that they're not interested in the government subsidy activity. They're very much focused on delivering in the commercially viable areas. So, there's a range of suppliers out there. We don't favour any one over another, really. We just work with the ones that we can, and within the state aid parameters that we've got, which at the moment means, our prime contracts are with Openreach, and they've delivered 114,000 upgrades for us within that contract.
Thank you.
Right. And we have is that Jack, have you finished? And Roger? Then we'll go on to Councillor Collett.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions, if I may. Glenn, I think you mentioned during your presentation that the Virgin system is not to the same capacity as fibre to the premises. I'd like to understand that a little bit better. Certainly the impression in the earlier days was that Virgin was the best you can get, and I've never heard any contradiction of that, but what you're saying suggests that maybe that isn't the case, and I think it's good for us to understand that. The second question, if I can do that at the same time, is your presentation is full of really useful information. In order to make sure I'm able to understand it all fully, is there any glossary of terms and acronyms and so on that we can refer to in our own time in order to understand the detail of some of these points? Thank you.
Thanks. That's very good. To address your last point first, I'm sorry if I put too many acronyms in. It wasn't my intention. It's just when you sort of are immersed in it all the time, you sometimes forget which ones people know and don't. They generally speaking,
it's the nature of the business, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. if you're able to just Google them, then they will. There are ready explanations out there. Right. They're all kind of industry standard terms. But if you have anything that's difficult that you can't get an answer for, then just drop me an email, and I'll happily put an answer out for you. The point I was trying to make about the Virgin network is the legacy Virgin network is not FTTP. It's a thing called DOCSIS 3, which relies heavily on coax cable, and it's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's very good. And again, you get the speed that you actually buy, but it isn't FTTP. And there's a lot of heat noise out there about FTTP, and the point I was trying to make is that FTTP isn't the only answer. It is an answer, and it's a great answer, but it isn't the only thing that can deliver gigabit capable connections. So the Virgin network under DOCSIS 3 can deliver gigabit connections, and that's why that gigabit number is higher than the FTTP number, because that takes into account the additional capacity that's delivered by the Virgin network. Interestingly, Virgin are making the move over now, and their new network deployments are FTTP. But the legacy system, the DOCSIS 3 system, is, as you say, pretty robust. So that's not I'm not being negative towards that at all.
Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that, Adrian, or are you happy with that?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right. Anybody want to put a hand up for clarification or a question on the presentation so far? I don't see anything there, so we will go on to the Openreach presentations.
Sorry, Chairman, Jackie Porter's just put her hand up.
I'm just taking what Gwen's point, Chairman, if I may. On the broadband provision across Hampshire, then, in what Glenn has just said, number of premises with full fibre availability and number of premises with gigabit availability, and in many cases that's the same number. Is that because it's a Virgin availability or an Openreach availability, or is it just a coincidence that the two numbers are the same?
Let me just go back a slide. Let's have a look.
What slide are we on?
That one. So
Okay.
I'm just comparing Winchester. So number of premises with full fibre availability 433, and with Gigabit 4435, and if you look at Havant, it's 672, 672, 564, 564. So are they, Basingstoke-on-Deane is different, probably because of the number of new buildings that have been built there, but could you explain the difference between those two columns, please?
Yeah, sure. So the Virgin network is being upgraded in stages. And so there are parts of the Virgin network, primarily around Southampton, that have been upgraded to gigabit capable connections. There are parts of the Virgin network that haven't, and Winchester is one of those parts.
So are those two numbers different? They just happen to be similar, or are they actually Virgin sites or open?
Well, in that case, I think that's actually full fibre. So that's probably new housing developments in Winchester district that have got full fibre.
Okay.
And the existing, so for instance, if I live in a block of flats, I've got a Virgin connection and an OpenReach connection if I want them. I've obviously only got one contract. I'm not that mad, but the Virgin network into my property will only support 300 megs because they haven't upgraded the rest of the network. But if I was living in Southampton and I had a Virgin connection, it would be gigabit capable because they've upgraded their part of the network in Southampton.
So the numbers just happen to be because they're new properties, and so they've in many cases got that potential availability. They've not been consciously upgraded. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is, sorry, the two columns indicate full fibre, so that's FTTP, versus the number of premises that can get gigabit capable. So let's take Basingstoke-on-Deane as the best example of this. There are 15,612 properties with full fibre connections available to them in Basingstoke-on-Deane district. However, because the Virgin Media network is also there, and they have upgraded significant parts of their existing DOCSIS 3 coax cable network to do gigabit capable connections, there are actually 41,000 properties, 41,000 properties that can get gigabit capable speeds.
That's really helpful, Glenn. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Interesting question, actually, Jackie. Thank you. Right, I'll give you another chance before I say sold. Any other questions for Glenn and Patrick at this point? I'm sure there'll be questions again later. And there's a hand up. Who's that?
Councillor Carew.
Adam Carew. Councillor Carew.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just would like to ask what there always seems to be a sort of disparity between the speeds that we're told we can get and the ones that we actually get. How is this measured, and how are people monitoring that we're actually getting the full speeds that we should be getting? I know that I've suffered from this myself. I paid a lot of money to get broadband in all my rooms in my house, and yet it still doesn't work to that extent, and it's still not as quick as it is in other places. So I'd be very keen to hear why this problem occurs and what we're doing about it. Thank you.
Interesting question.
Thank you. What would I say? So there are a number of issues. The way that the contract is monitored and the way that the speeds are monitored within our contract is to the network termination point in your house. So it's and that's how the speeds are measured. Once it's inside your house, then the cabling and wiring inside the house can have a really significant impact on the speed that you actually experience. The proximity to things like fridges, water tanks, fish tanks, all sorts of things can really impact on the speed that you experience inside the house. So that's probably the comment I would make about that. There is obviously a distance issue if you are on, to use another acronym, FTTC, which is fibre from the cabinet to your house, because the distance from the cabinet to the house is covered by copper wire, and the further you are from the house, from the cabinet, the slower your speed gets to be. So That can sometimes be a problem. And then there's the issue of who you choose as a supplier. Some suppliers have contention ratios which are very high. So the contention ratio means that for every given megabit of capacity on the network, how many on their core network, how many customers do they have? So some companies have quite low contention ratios, maybe 40 or 50. Some companies have 100 or more. And so if you've got 10 megs to your house, and at peak times, you could be only getting a 10th or a 50th of that network capacity if everybody else is also using the network. So the speed from your house to the box will be fine, but the speed from the box back to the internet, there'll be some contention there, because that's the way that they make their business model work. So there are all sorts of conflicting elements that can affect the speed that you actually get in your house on a day-to-day basis.
Adam, back to you. Are you okay with that, Adam? I presume Adam was hearing what you were saying.
Yes,
there.
Chairman, thank you. I did say thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Mike Westbrook.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just sort of elaborate a little bit on what Adam has just said and what Glenn said in response. Can you just explain, say, for example, you're talking about when it comes into somebody's house, it becomes a problem. It could be what the situation is, how their setup is within their own home. Is that going to be made worse in apartment blocks, for example, where you're coming to the apartment blocks, and then once it goes in, people in those, it could be a number of properties in those blocks are going to be in that position, no fault of their own, but actual going through all the buildings to where you actually are within that building, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, typically apartment blocks are quite well covered. The big problem normally is older houses with big, thick, solid stone walls that make Wi-Fi signals very difficult to distribute. It's not normally a problem for housing blocks, as far as I'm aware, anyway.
Yeah. So in relation to once it goes, so you're saying when it goes to the particular properties within it, the copper, say from roadside up through the building to the individual properties would be as quick as anything else, really. And it's just the setup. Yep. If it's a new build property on Wi-Fi within rooms, it should be okay.
Yeah, normally. Okay. Sometimes within rooms, if you've got particularly good insulation with the silver foil type backing to it, that can cause Wi-Fi signals to break down. So you might need to put repeaters in, but the actual speed to the house should be pretty good.
Okay. Flat. Thank you, Glenn. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, Mike. Bruce Tennant.
Thank you, Chair. I've recently upgraded from basic broadband to superfast. Yet this morning, when I check the download speed during this meeting, it's telling me I've got 9 megabits per second, which is the same I had for basic. The connection's much better than it was because I now have a dual band router and a couple of, well, it's a mesh system, a couple of repeaters. But as I understand it, superfast broadband is a maximum of 30 megabits per second, but I'm only getting 9. What do you think I should do about that?
An agony column.
Okay, so I think from memory, your road wasn't one that we were able to upgrade to super fast speeds.
It is FTTC, so it is actually super fast.
No. So FTTC. Okay. Let me start. Let me go back a bit. So FTTC, yes, is part of the program, and we might upgrade a cabinet. And the cabinet might serve 300 properties. The distance of those properties from the cabinet affects the speed that they get. So our baseline for measuring superfast is 24 megs. And if a property gets 24 megs, and it could get 80, depending on how close it is to the cabinet, we then count that as superfast. So anywhere between 24 and 80 from a fibre to the cabinet box. However, if you're more than 1,000 meters away from the box, in round numbers, probably 1,200 meters upwards from the box, you will still get an improved speed, but it will be less than 24 megs. We don't count those in terms of the super fast target, but they will still be getting a better speed than they would from the exchange. It's just less than 24. So you might get 20, you might get 10, but that's better than the 2 or 3 that you would have had from the exchange. But it doesn't count as super fast.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Glenn.
A note came in saying, can we please stick to Hampshire's problems, not individuals? But my comment to that is, individual problems may well be shared by an awful lot of people who live in Hampshire. Okay, Roger Huckstep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to double check something that Glenn has said, my understanding is that standard broadband has download speeds of less than 30 megabytes, not 24, and superfast broadband is between 30 and 300. Is that his understanding?
Thank you, Councillor. Broadly, yes. It's difficult. So when we started our contracts, the definition was 24 megs and above to be super fast, and anything below 24 megs is not super fast. In later years, so somewhere around 2017, 2018, I think the EU changed the definition of super fast to be 30 megs. So you'll see a lot of the Ofcom reports talk about 30 megs and above, but all of our contracts are based on 24 megs and above. So it's a minor difference, but it's just something to be aware of.
Thank you for the confusion.
Pleasure.
Right. Now I'm now eager, I'm sure you all are, to hear from OpenReach. So since there are no hands up at the moment, I'm going to take that and take advantage of that. We'll take other questions after. So may I bring in the very patient Connie Dixon, the Partnership Director for Wales, West of England, and Stephen Harris, the Partnership Manager for Berkshire, Hampshire, Isle of Wight and Wiltshire. And I'd like to thank you both very much for coming, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Over to you, Connie, or is it going to be Stephen?
I think it's over to me first. So first of all, hello, nice to meet you all and thank you for having us. I think we should have a screen share with some slides. Is that going to be you, Steve?
It's just come in, Connie.
Perfect. If you just want to let us know when you can see it, just give a bit of time for it to come through.
Yeah, it's there.
Brilliant. You can all see it?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So yeah, first of all, I think if myself and Steve just do a quick introduction. So I'm Connie Dixon and I'm the Partnership Director for OpenReach for Wales and the West of England, which is effectively our nation and region where we operate. And Steve, I don't know if you just want to quickly give an introduction of yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So yeah, I'm Steve Harris, Partnership Manager. So primarily manage the contract within Hampshire and other areas, and then also wider engagement with stakeholders.
Brilliant. So before, Steve, if you just want to go on to the first slide, but just before I start kind of going through a bit of a history, and I know that Glenn has already covered off some of this, so I will, in the interest of time, scoot over some of those points. But first of all, I just kind of think it might be worthwhile just doing a quick recap. I suspect that obviously most people already know who OpenReach are, but for those of you who don't, we're the UK's digital network infrastructure builder, and we're on a mission to get the best broadband for the UK. And it's probably worth just touching on an important point. We have, about 2 years ago, became independent from BT. So we are a wholesaler and we operate an open network. So that means that we provide services for 640 retail providers. So that's the likes of TalkTalk, Sky, EE, and so that gives consumers great choice. So they use our network through those retail providers who then have that direct relationship with the consumer. So I think just to point that out. And obviously, Glenn touched on it, lockdown, it's taught us a lot and it's made us appreciate things differently. We've spent the last 10 years and over £14 billion investing in our network to get it to the place where during the added pressures of lockdown, so homeschooling, home working, our network didn't miss a beat. It stood the test of lockdown, and actually this year we saw broadband usage more than double. So in December 2020, we saw broadband usage double from the previous year. And we've got a lot going on across Hampshire, and I'll talk through a little bit more around what we're doing. But through existing partnerships with BDUK, Hampshire County Council, and dozens of communities where we're working with them on community fibre partnerships across the county. And in addition, we've also announced a £12 billion investment to bring full fibre to 20 million homes and businesses across the UK by mid to late 2020. But we know that there's more to do, and that's by Openreach and others across the sector. So if I just move on to what you can see in front of you. So this is just a little bit of a kind of a history of where we've been in Hampshire, and I won't kind of re-go over what Glenn's already covered, but essentially if we look back to 2012, Hampshire had 80% superfast coverage, which was, which is pretty good going at the time, but through the co-funding arrangement, so the arrangement that we have with Hampshire County Council is co-funded, so it is together, we were able to kind of together take that target right up to what we've seen now through those contracts from 2013 right up until now, where we've gone past 95% and currently at 97%, and obviously striving to do more. And in a short amount of time, Steve will touch on kind of where we're at with the current contract and where that's going forward. But if I just do a little bit more of a backtrack to 2019. So in 2019, I would say we've kind of made quite a shift. So Glenn touched on what is our copper network, so fibre to the cabinet utilising copper, and he also talked about full fibre, so fibre to the premise. So over the last 3 years, we've kind of pivoted from building traditional copper-based networks to an ultra-fast, ultra-reliable, so full fibre to the premise. And we're currently building 40,000 homes and businesses every week. So we're really ramping up the volume of build that we're doing each week across the UK. And in 2019, we announced an ambition that we would build 4.5 million homes with full fibre by the end of March 2021, so by the end of this month. And we're on track for that. So that's commercial investment where we will upgrade and build full fibre to 4.5 million homes by the end of this month, and we're firmly on track to achieve that. And included in that was one of the first announcements was in Hampshire, and that was Basingstoke. So that was our commitment that we would build that full fibre network across the exchange area of Basingstoke. And then if we look forward, we increased that fibre ambition. So it's a £12 billion investment, and we've gone from an ambition of 4.5 million homes to 20 million homes by mid to late 2020s. And what we did was we did our very first rural trials, and that was to demonstrate that we could build commercially in the more rural areas at an affordable cost point using innovative techniques. So we were able to make, within that 20 million homes and businesses ambition, we were able to make a commitment that we wouldn't just focus on those really urban areas where the commercial return was greater. We would make a commitment to include in at least 3.2 million what we would class as kind of Ofcom Area 3, so the harder to reach locations. And for Hampshire, that included Alton, Hollybourne, Chawton, Shalden, Borden, Kingsley within that announcement. So they will be part of our commercial upgrade programme. So kind of fast forward a little bit, to have such huge ambitions, we obviously need, excellent and talented engineers to be able to do that. So in December 2020, we announced a recruitment campaign, and we announced that Openreach would be recruiting 2,500 new jobs across the UK. And that would be matched with just over 2,500 roles within our supply chain with our partners. And for the South East, that announcement included 341 for the South East, and 70 of those will be in Hampshire. So 70 new roles created directly with Openreach to be part of our engineering workforce. And that's really important because we want to recruit and employ engineers that will be responsible for building and upgrading the network within the communities that they live. And then if we fast forward, there's some other really key points. We've made a commitment that with that increase in engineers, we will transition all of our vans to electric by 2030. And we've also made a commitment by upgrading and refurbishing a new training school. So that's in Southampton, and we'd be more than welcome to open an offer to anybody when we can to come and visit that training school. And what's key to that is that it's a simulated environment. So we have what we call an open street. It looks like an everyday street with poles, with homes, with flats, with various different types of buildings where our engineers can go and train in that simulated environment to accelerate their learner journey, ready to be out, in and amongst the communities of Hampshire. So we'll be having a formal opening in the coming months, and as I said, we'd welcome if anybody would like to visit that training school. Then please let me know. We'd love to show you around. So if I can move on to the next slide. So just going to do a quick recap of, okay, where are we in Hampshire today? So in Hampshire today, we're at 97% superfast coverage, and we're at 9.5% full fibre. And together, and it is together, it's through our contract, together we have upgraded over 115,000 homes and businesses across Hampshire to superfast and ultrafast broadband. We've already provided full fibre to over 8,000 homes and businesses through that commercial investment, through that programme that I touched on, our ambition to get to 20 million across the UK. We've already upgraded over 4,000 in Basingstoke and over 4,000 in the smaller rural towns. And we're already as well connected 29 community schemes. So that's communities that have worked with us using the broadband vouchers from both UK government and from Hampshire. And we've already connected 29 communities. But actually what lockdown has done is it's really thrown the opportunity of community fibre partnerships to a number more communities that are interested. So actually we're working with over 400 communities that have registered an interest with us to look at progressing a community fibre partnership. And then when I look at, okay, Openreach in Hampshire, so we already employ 830 employees that live in Hampshire, and obviously that's going to grow with our latest recruitment, but also we'll through our the recruitment that will be taking place with our partners. And we continue to be the UK's largest private sector employer of apprentices. So everybody that is employed by Openreach as an engineer will go through an apprenticeship. So they'll be able to learn and earn at the same time. And then really, if I just touch on, over the last year, we have our engineers have been out there with key worker status. And I think, we've got to look at how they've continued to deliver throughout the pandemic, and in particular, supporting national infrastructure. So including vaccination centres to get them up and running with, with record breaking time. And we have got some case studies that if anybody would be looking, I think it's a Hampshire specific case study that we can share after this session, if that's of interest. So I'm going to move on now and pass over to Steve, and Steve's going to go into a bit more detail about the current contract that we've got with Hampshire.
Thanks, Connie. Yeah, so as has already been touched on in Glenn's presentation as well, as a result of the two BGUK funded contracts that we've delivered in Hampshire, as well as the 115,000 premises covered directly as part of those contracts, other premises around those premises have also sometimes also benefited. So this map gives you an overview of around 130,000 premises that are due to either directly benefit or indirectly benefit as part of those programs. The green markers there show through the original contract, and the orange markers show through the current ongoing STEP Hampshire programme. And as Connie's just described to you as well, in addition to that, that's going to be further expanded through our commercial programmes in terms of Basingstoke, the Alton and Borden builds in the surrounding towns, and also obviously new sites, which we'll come on to in a bit. Just wanted to make a point at this stage as well that obviously for individuals, if you do want to be able to check what current speeds are available, there are different ways of doing that. There's the broadband availability checker, which I'm sure we can provide a link to. And obviously there's lots of information on your own Superfast Hampshire website as well. And then if I go on,
Steve, we can share, we've got a useful guide to how to check for the current availability and also other matters that might be of interest to you, councillors. So we'll share that after the session as well, so that you can see how to access that information.
Perfect.
And before you go on, CRFS stands for what?
Sorry, yeah. So that stands for ready for service. So that's where a property, as Glenn was explaining earlier, whether or not they've actually taken up that service, but a superfast service is available to all of those premises.
And SEP?
So that's the Superfast Extension Programme. We got that right, Glenn?
Yeah, so that's right. It's our second contract.
Yeah, the second contract. So as I say, some of those premises are still being delivered, the ones that are in orange, because they're part of that ongoing programme. Which I was just about to come on to in a second to explain a bit more.
And please explain your acronyms as you go through, okay?
Yes, we'll do. Sorry about that. So yeah, if I go on to remaining coverage, and as Glenn said, so after the end of this quarter, the only remaining coverage that we have for the current contract will be related to the New Forest. So we've recently agreed a revision of that programme that takes us up to the end of June 2022 for these remaining communities. Glenn touched on it as well. There have been particular challenges in the New Forest relating to the permissions that are required because of the nature of working in that area and some of the complexity of build that is then involved. Working closely alongside those various stakeholders, be it Verdurers, Natural England, Forestry Commission, all those are involved. So we've worked very closely with Glenn, Patrick and the Hampshire team to revise this plan. So we now have intrusive surveys that are going on for all of the remaining structures. We've allowed time in that plan for all of the necessary permissions to be sought and agreed before seeking a go or no-go decision on an individual structure by structure basis. So that process will be time limited, but we're at an early stage in that plan, but we're currently well on track and actually ahead of schedule with some of those structures. So I think that we've really seen in the last few months that closer working coming together, having early benefits, and we're obviously very committed to seeing that through. Alongside actually the contract delivery, we've also had recent progress through our commercial programme. So our chief engineers have been working in the New Forest, and again working collaboratively with those local stakeholders to overcome the challenges that are posed. We've recently just been using some equipment in the New Forest that hasn't been used anywhere else in the UK, and that's been used to great effect to minimise disruption and make sure we can deliver service to communities as quickly as possible. I think I'll hand back to Connie to cover a bit more on community fibre partnerships.
Thanks, Steve. So when we talk about community fibre partnerships, I think Glenn touched on it. This is where communities that aren't currently in a plan, so they're not due to be upgraded, and they're not due to benefit from any other programme. It's important for us that we do have a solution that's available for them to pursue. And so through our community fibre partnership scheme, we've been able to across the UK upgrade hundreds of thousands of homes in this way. So it gives people certainty, it gives people the opportunity to work directly with Openreach to design and work on a solution for their community. And we can see across Hampshire, what you can see on the map is we've got just under 17,000 premises that have already been connected, and you can see indicated on the green map where that green pins where that is on the map. And we've got a further 1,200 premises across community schemes that are currently in build. So that build is ongoing. And again, you can see there in the orange pins. And then we've also got 1,700 premises where there is a final offer out. So that is where we have designed a solution for that community and they've been given the solution and the price, and then it's for the community to decide whether they want to take that forward. So I'm sure as we move forward next year, once the criteria for the new scheme by government is confirmed, we'll see, significantly more communities being able to benefit and move forward with the scheme. And just to say, firstly, the upgrade and the top up from Hampshire has been really appreciated by the communities, because it's allowed a number of schemes to go forward where otherwise perhaps they wouldn't have. But also we've listened to feedback from communities, and we have this year launched a slight change to how we can operate community fibre partnerships. So where we can see that using the government and Hampshire's top-up scheme, we can fully cover the cost of the build utilising vouchers, plus a small buffer, because people's circumstances may change in a 12-month build period. We have been able to change the way in which we work with communities and offer, in some circumstances, what we call a demand-led approach. And that's slightly different in that we haven't used a traditional contract with the community. What we've done is we've set up a website, a bit like a GoFundMe page, and all of the eligible premises within that community can go onto that website. They'll receive a postcard through the door, which asks them to go onto the website and to pledge their voucher. And what that is there's they need to tick to say that they will take up a service after we've built it. So effectively they're saying once the build is complete, they commit to taking up a service. And by taking up a service, that means that we Openreach can then draw down the voucher funding. So we will build at risk. So we will build the community, and then after we've built, by the community then taking up a service, we're able to draw down the voucher from the Gigabit voucher scheme. So sorry, my door's just going. Always best timing, isn't it? And now the test is whether one of my children will actually come down from their bedrooms and answer it. But yeah, so the kind of demand-led scheme is a different approach that we've introduced this year, and it's taken some of the complexity around having to have a contract, and it's allowed us to go for bigger schemes in the community and really work closely with the community to help encourage people to understand the benefits that having full fibre can bring. And I'm going to hand back now to Steve, who's going to touch on new sites.
Thanks, Honey. So just to emphasise at Openreach, we obviously want all new homes to be built with the best possible broadband, and that being full fibre FTTP. So we're working proactively with new site developers to offer free FTTP to all developments of 20 plots or more, and asking for a small contribution from the developer for where those plots have less than 20 premises. I'll come on to that in a bit more. There's a second slide for that. This slide just gives you an overview of our work on new sites, which I won't go through in great detail, but just to point out there, we are connecting more than 3,500 new homes every week to full fibre on new sites in the UK. And we do have a specific team available to provide support and encouragement. So that goes right from the pre-planning stage right through to plots being completed. There are many advantages to having an open network. So whether that is packages from low cost, low bandwidth, right up to the fastest speeds, depending on what the customer wants to take. Obviously that competition ensures best prices for residents. So there's a great range of retail providers that are now offering FTTP products over our open network, and customers can potentially then make further savings by taking up multiple contracts, be that for their mobile, broadband, TV, telephone, but the choice is with the consumer. This open access full fibre network on new sites doesn't require street furniture. It's future-proof, it's fault-resistant, and future speed uplifts can be achieved without the need to replace the cables. And we also share our duct network with other providers. So that means that a development can have multiple networks installed while the developer only actually needs to build one physical duct and chamber network. So progress is still being made all the time on delivering this to new sites. You can see the stat there that 91% of new build plots are now receiving full fibre. Obviously 9% of all plots are still being built without full fibre. So it's our ambition to make sure that that is continually improved. This slide again just emphasised the point I made there around our commitment to new sites. We're also trying to move to a more proactive approach where we're working directly with local authorities to align with upcoming regulation around gigabit networks being mandated in all new build properties. And in addition, we've aligned our rate card for developments below 20 plots to the maximum developer contribution for full fibre. So we're asking local authorities to consider the legacy and sustainability of the network as that they choose to install during construction. Many local authorities and housing associations don't currently mandate who or what type of networks are procured. So we just encourage those conversations around having with your builders around digital connectivity, what speeds are actually being installed, and what choice, most importantly, will that resident have now and into the future. Obviously at Openreach we have a nationwide presence. We don't pick and choose which sites are commercially viable, and we'll provide this standard proposition to all developments wherever they are and whatever the type of plot. And back over to you, Connie.
Thank you. So another kind of really important point, I think, just to stress really is, okay, so what's the benefit of full fibre? So even before the pandemic, Openreach, we commissioned a report by the Centre for Economic and Business, and it made some really, really important points I just want to share. And what I can do is share the full report with you. So first of all, full fibre, so a fully fibred southeast and a fully fibred UK. So what would that do? So actually across the UK, there would be an increase in GVA of 59 billion, and for the southeast, that would be 8.7 billion. So an increase in GVA by having full fibre, a fully fibred southeast and UK. And actually, you know, we can see that by having full fibre, 1.4% increase in employment for the southeast. And also can obviously reduce commuting trips, so 300 million less commuting trips, and a reduction of 36,000 tonnes of carbon. So it's got huge benefits from an economic perspective, but also from a green perspective. And it enables so many more people to have choice around where they live and where they work. So, you know, so many more people can work from home. And I think if I just kind of go on to what is it, you know, what is it about full fibre? So if I can just kind of touch on, I can't remember if there's another slide. I think the next slide, do you mind just flicking for me? Yeah, okay, so this is just something for you to kind of have a look at after. But if I just touch on why do we think full fibre is so important? So as I said, it's got huge economic benefits, but actually from a very simple perspective, it's faster. So it is 18 times faster than the average UK broadband speed in the UK at the moment. It's more reliable. So it's much more reliable than a traditional copper connection. It's not affected by external interference. So electric fences, bad weather, and in particular lightning strikes. And I think there was a question around the distance that the speeds that can go through a full fibre network. Well, actually, it can go, we know already it can go over 120 miles without any loss of speed. So at the moment, I think they're trying to break how far using the fibre optic network, how far we can go without a loss of speed. But already we know it can go over 120 miles. And then kind of finally, it's about the future. So it's future-proofed. So only a few years ago, we used half the data that we do now, and speeds were a third of what they are today. but a full fibre network is future-proofed for the massive increase of data usage and new technologies that we see is going to come in the future. So the design of the network means that you just change what's in the exchange or what's in your home. The fibre optic remains the same, so you can dial up as we move into more data-hungry services and applications in the future. So it really is a network that's here for many generations to come. And so you can see there's 10 fantastic full fibre facts here for you to kind of look at a later date. And really that's it. We're open to any questions that you may have.
Okay, Luke, can I thank you? You finished, have you? Thank you.
Yeah.
Connie and Stephen, thank you very much indeed for a very thorough introduction to the work that you're doing. I'd like this opportunity to say thank you very much to Patrick and Glenn. I forgot to mention that. Now, if we could go into questions for clarification and comments on the presentation first, before we get into the heavy bit, okay? So let's start with the first hand that's gone up, who is, it's Jackie Porter.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. Really enthusiastic presentations. I really appreciated it, and I'm as excited by it as you are, I have to say. You mentioned about taking on employees to do the work on the using your apprenticeship scheme, which I've heard about before, and it's really impressive. But what about the people that will actually manage the contracts? That's where we found the problems. I just wanted to know if you have any idea of the personnel schemes that are going to be there to manage the contracts.
In relation to our arrangement with Hampshire, is that?
Yes.
It's Steve. So Steve, so I'm responsible alongside Steve, and then we work as the conduit between Hampshire and our build teams that actually build the contract. So actually go out and do that build work.
Okay, so it's just Steve, because there's a lot of contracts from what you're describing and potential contracts.
So no, there's only one single contract with Hampshire, and Steve is the partnership manager responsible for that contract.
Right. I just meant because you've got a lot of community groups.
There's the community schemes.
So you're having a lot of interactions, not just with Hampshire, but with lots of other groups as well, and builders and housing providers. And so how does that structure work?
Yes. So so all of it sits within the infrastructure development division of Openreach. So it's kind of, we all sit under one division, and that's led by a lady called Kim Mears, who's the managing director for that part of the business. And so there is a team that are designated to working with developers. So there is named individuals that I think Steve's already in the process of setting up some sessions with them and with the local authority, but they will already be working very closely with developers. So there will be a named individual that works with the developers as part of that kind of ongoing relationship. And then if I take a step and look at community fibre partnerships, where we've seen a real increase in interest and demand. And I think I have to acknowledge it has been tough because the increase came, all at once. So we do have a team that are the rural engagement managers. And I'm actually recruiting for additional rural engagement managers so that we can have more people that will be able to work with the communities. So there'll be a designated individual for Hampshire, and they are supported by many people in the background that do, costing, surveys, etc. But there will be an individual that will be working with Hampshire, but we will be getting more people collectively across the team to work with the various different local authorities.
Thank you.
Are you happy, Councillor Porter?
Yes, it was just in answer to the description of the additional staff. It was about the picture was about hands-on rather than the rest.
Well, you're right. One person can't do it all. Okay. Councillor Fran Carpenter.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, you talk about your community fibre partnerships. I just wondered, there was obviously one there in the New Forest. That's my area. I'm being a bit colloquial, but there was one in the New Forest which is on the final offer. I just wondered what the take-up had been generally across Hampshire, but also in the New Forest so far. And talking about the New Forest as well, you said you work closely with the Forestry Commission and the National Park Authority. I just wonder what can I tell New Forest residents about what they can expect in the nearish future? Because you did say quickly as possible, but I just wondered if there is any better time frame I can give them, or a more explicit time frame.
Are you happy to answer that one, Steve, around the New Forest build? And then I think on your question around community fibre partnerships, I'll have to take that away if that's okay. I don't have that information available, but I think what we can do is have a look at what the general interest has been around the New Forest, and let you know of any schemes that are near or have accepted and are progressing. But I'll let Steve answer around the actual build.
Yeah, in terms of the New Forest, it will depend obviously as to whether those local communities are due to be part of the contract delivery, or whether they are covered under another scheme like a community fibre partnership. In terms of the contract, so the revised timescale is now that we're due to complete all of those structures by the end of June 2022. But there is a staggered approach to those structures, and this is partly because of the level of permissions that need to be agreed and sought. And obviously we're dealing with various stakeholder groups there, and what we can't do is flood them with, some of these are volunteer groups. So it has to be managed in a careful way to make sure that we can actually get the permissions we need at the right time through the process. So where we can bring those timescales forward, we will do so. And as I said, one of the structures in that plan is already well advanced of where it was due to be, because less permissions were actually required on that structure. But yes, the programme itself now extends till the end of June next year. But community fibre partnerships, obviously, depending on the nature of the scheme, again, may have to come over some of those same challenges in terms of the permissions that are required. So there will be a variation. But again, if you've got a specific scheme, as Connie said, we can also look into that for you outside of this meeting.
If I could just come back, Chairman, if you don't mind. You talk about these permissions. Obviously, I know the forest is a bit complex in that respect. But you know, is there anything that local councillors can do to try and move that along locally? And also, you talked about volunteers having to be consulted. I just wondered who that would be.
So there are a number, Glenn might be able to expand on this for you, but there are a number of stakeholder groups, including the verderers. So there will obviously be volunteers involved in that process in terms of giving the required permissions, depending on the solution for a structure. So different structures, depending on the type of solution that's involved and also the location of it, which land it's going on, will require different permissions depending on what that is. But we do need those permissions to be in place, obviously, before we can commence build. So what we're doing in this revised plan is to make sure, as I said, with intrusive surveys, so we've done all of that prep work beforehand to try and avoid any, when we go out on site, finding new things. That means we then have to go back through that process and seek those permissions again. We work very closely with Glenn. We have weekly calls with Glenn, and he does involve local councillors or members if there are particular issues. But I would say in the last few months, that sort of closer working together directly with the stakeholders between ourselves and Hampshire, we are seeing the benefits of that. We're at a very early stage in terms of this plan and the new structures that are coming through, but we are seeing the benefits already of having a much closer and very clearly set out approach that means those stakeholders know exactly what's happening at what time.
Thank you very much.
Are you happy, Fran?
Yes, thank you.
Russell Oppenheimer.
Thank you, Chairman. It was a good presentation, and I was really pleased to hear the enthusiasm that you guys at Openreach have for full fibre. And I do want to say that's the correct thing to focus on. But my question is about fibre to the cabinet, which I think is important. I was hoping to hear something about it. Because, why is it important? Because many rural residents are going to be stuck with fibre to the cabinet for another 5, 6 or 7 years. And because of the distance from the cabinet, some of them are on speeds of 5 megabits per second. Some are even as low as 2 megabits per second. And these are often businesses, small farms, B&Bs, cottage industries. They need faster broadband. They often don't have enough neighbours to get a CFP together. So what I'm asking is, what can you do to boost the speeds to the cabinet? Better cables, better bandwidth going into the cabinet, so that their speeds at their homes and their businesses will be increased. Thank you.
No pressure then, okay?
So I think I'm just going to reflect back to, I think, a question that was asked earlier, and Glenn gave an explanation around kind of the distance from the cabinet. So some communities may be served on a line that is just too far from the cabinet to get those super fast speeds. So I think there's two things for me. One is, obviously, if they haven't been part of any programme before, obviously my initial response would have been to suggest a community fibre partnership. I know you said that perhaps there's not enough neighbours to make that happen, but I would say kind of the first step would be to explore that and to find out whether that's possible. But secondly, obviously the next key is around the government's outside in. So that outside in programme, which was touched on earlier as well in the presentation, that the communities that you've talked about, I would expect that they would be part of that upgrade, so that full fibre upgrade as part of the outside in programme, which we will see happen over. Actually, the consultation has already gone out to the local authorities, and we'll start to see that, I would expect, happen over the next coming months and immediate years. So for those communities, I think they're the two options that I would say at this point. If they're not in a plan, that's what I would see as the solution. But you're right, kind of fibre to the cabinet is being vitally, important, and you've only got to look at how it has stood up to the test of lockdown. But unfortunately, there are some communities that don't get that super fast speed, and that's where we need to look at, what other options are there for them.
Back to you, Russell.
Well, okay, I was hoping that there would be something you could do in the background, behind the scenes, to actually increase the speeds going into the cabinets, which would have a beneficial impact, even if it's only like, a 15–20% benefit. I think it's still worth doing because of the length of time these people are going to have to wait for full fibre. But I'll look into Inside Out, which I don't know very much about. So thanks for your answer.
And for the cabinet, obviously, if there's specific queries that you've got, and you're saying that they're already upgraded to super fast, and there may be a challenge with something that we can improve, then absolutely more than happy to have a look at. But if we're talking about upgrading cabinets that haven't been upgraded before, I think is that what you're saying, or is it regarding super fast cabinets that are already in place, in which case, if the premise is at a certain distance away from that cabinet, then it isn't a case of just increasing speeds into the cabinet for the end user to experience better broadband.
Okay, understood.
But more than happy, if you want to let me know specifically the query, I can certainly take away and better understand the question that you're posing.
Okay, thanks.
You can always come back later, Russell. Okay. Now I've got Councillor Reid has come in. It might be on this issue, so Councillor Reid, please proceed.
Actually, it was a question on a different issue, Jonathan. If you want to close this theme down.
Okay, I'll bring you in at the right time then. Okay, I've got Bruce Tennant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question, Connie, is about the gigabit aspirations. I've been speaking to a number of my residents who are very excited about the opportunity of getting gigabit broadband, and I've learnt over the last few months not to speak to them in too much detail about the technicalities of it, because all they're really interested in is being able to download movies very quickly, or to be able to do their work from home. But one of the difficulties that I have is not knowing where in my county division gigabit broadband is not available. During your presentation, did you say that you will be giving us maps to to highlight where the gigabit broadband isn't available, so that we can target, we can speak to those residents.
So I think so we can certainly send you out a guide on how to check the availability at a premise level, so people can have a look at their own premises to see what technology is available. But obviously, I'm just talking from an OpenReach perspective here. So what's important is that we are just one of many infrastructure builders. So what the local authority will do, and I don't know whether Glenn wants to comment on this, is that there's something called an open market review. So an open market review is led by the local authority, and that's where they will consult with all of the sector to understand what's already available and what's in a future plan. It's not something it's not data that OpenReach would own, and that would inform the local authority around where the kind of not spots are. So I can kind of certainly give you information from an OpenReach perspective around what technology is available, and that's a quick, people can check that at any time for themselves. But I think in the wider where are the not spots, I'm pretty sure I saw that on one of the earlier slides that was presented by Glenn around where the not spots currently are.
Thank you, Connie. I'm very interested in the this. You know, you mentioned about residents pledging that they will buy gigabit broadband when it becomes available, and I can really understand that that's important, because you're not going to be wanting to invest in putting in the infrastructure if there's no take up within that area. So you do need that pledging. The conversations I've been having with residents is around that very topic, because I've realised some time ago that it's all to do with commercial enterprise, and the pledging is really important, which is why I'm wanting to talk to my residents about that very topic of pledgings, and that's why it's important to me to know where to target, because my county division covers 15,000 odd people. And I need to know which areas don't have that connection and which do, so I can then speak to those residents, because so far the areas that I have discovered don't have gigabit broadband, there's a high percentage of potential take-up because of the issues that you were talking about to do with the pandemic and people working from home, wanting to Netflix, watching more streaming movies and things like that. So that's why I'm interested in knowing, rather than just, I know I can put a postcode into in search for an individual premises, but I was trying to get a better idea of the gigabit take up within my county division.
So there are plans that we've announced, which are Basingstoke and the other Alton and Borden. So they are in a plan for ultra-fast fibre from us. There will also be those new site developments that we're currently working on. There will also be community fibre partnerships, and then there will be the work that we're doing for full fibre within the contract itself with Hampshire. So there are a number of different kind of, I suppose, opportunities to benefit. But quite often, I think just a point to make is sometimes it's easy to think that you can look at a county, or you can have a look at a postcode and everybody will benefit from the same infrastructure. Sometimes you may have what appears to be neighbours and they're fed from different exchange areas, so they would come from a different infrastructure. So that's why we do try and encourage it to be looked at where it's possible on a premise basis. But if kind of going back to communities and if they're going to benefit from FTTP from us, but obviously the important thing is to understand whether they are also going to be benefit from any other infrastructure builder plans as well.
Thank you, Connie. So final question. I'm very interested in taking up your offer of attending the opening of the training school in Southampton. I live in East Leeds, so it's very sort of part of Southampton conurbation. Can I have your contact details so that I can...
Bruce, the way we'll do this, Bruce, is that when OpenReach want to invite us, we'll do it through the committee, okay? And then we'll organise if there's a take-up, we'll organise several people at the same time, if that's going to be allowed. Okay, I'm sure you'd like to go, Bruce, but you know, just sign up. But we'll do it through Louise Pickford.
Yeah, I can take those details from OpenReach, Chairman, so that not only the invite but also the other information that OpenReach have asked they could send to us as a committee. So I'll be the conduit for all that. Thank you. Before we go on to the next question, Chairman, I just wondered if OpenReach are happy, do we want to stop screen sharing so that we can see?
Well, unless, of course, somebody asks for a screen to be put back up again. I presume that's pretty easy, is it?
Yeah, I can reshare the presentation.
Okay, right. Let's take the screen down.
Thank you.
Oh, that's very attractive. Right. No. Okay. Now I'm going to bring in Stephen Reid at this point because he's been waiting patiently. Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan. Mine's a bit of a left field question. One of the entries that was on the slide just then was that with such and such a speed, you could have 4 people downloading and so on at the same time. And I'm sure that that is the capability of the line, but it might not be the capability of the router or the right router for the shape of the house. So do you offer any advice to users who are being disappointed with their products as to equipping their house to best effect to get that delivery?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
So in that circumstance, the right point of contact would be back to the service provider. So a service provider would run diagnostics on the router, etc., on your behalf. So that is where you as the consumer would go back to your service provider. And if there was any work that they felt that OpenReach was required to come and do, they would instruct us to come and do that. But it would be on their instruction. So the first port of call would be go back to your service provider, and they will run diagnostics, perhaps send out a new router, etc., etc.
Yes. Okay. My fear is that when somebody takes out a contract with BT or Virgin or whoever, they actually get thrown in a free router, which is likely to be lower down the range than a shop-bought one and might not be delivering everything that the customer hoped for. True or false?
So a router would be designed to provide the service that, generally speaking, in my experience, the router would be designed and it would be issued in accordance with the service that's being purchased. So I would suggest that, yeah, going back to the provider, because ultimately, they will have a router that should serve the purpose for the service that you've purchased.
Okay.
Well, moment, Steve.
Thank you.
You sure?
Yeah.
Right. Let's go back on to Jackie Porter.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Connie and Steve. Hopefully you can help with this one. First of all, Steve said the programme will be working until June next year. Did he mean June? June. But is it June this year or next year? And is that the new programme, the one that's going to be starting, or was that my mishearing?
No, sorry. So yeah, it's June 2022, but this is the existing contract that we have with Hampshire, which is the SEP Superfast Extension Programme contract, and it's an extension purely for those new forest structures where we've had to put a specific plan in place in order to meet the challenges that are there. But yes, so it's not related to the new procurement.
I've got a series of questions. So the next one is the community fibre programme process has been very, very complicated and has used a lot of knowledge from a lot of local people. So when they received their letter, as I did, on the 11th of February, to say, hello there, we're stopping it. Then it says that there'll be a new scheme in live 2021. Does this mean that the data that's been collected by all those volunteers up to this stage will not be able to be used and they'll have to resubmit, or will they be able to use the data they've collected already and that you now have in the new scheme, or will the whole thing start again?
So in terms of the scheme itself, that is, so community fibre partnerships continue. What's being referenced is the UK Gigabit voucher scheme. So that's the DCMS, their voucher scheme that is operating. And That is due to end at the end of March.
Right.
We are waiting for clarification around the criteria for the new scheme and the value of those vouchers. And we are informed that the schemes will transfer, into the new scheme beyond the end of this year. But obviously, I can't comment until we do see, the criteria that's set out for the new voucher scheme. But we are continuing, and we have every confidence that schemes will transition and into next year. And they'll, the information, they won't be starting again. It all comes down to what vouchers they can access in order to bridge the gap in funding. So it's purely down to the vouchers.
I think the most concern, well, two sides. One, the value of those, because
Yes.
I think I have over 1,000 residents in my division, so something like 7% of my division are actually currently registered under the Community Fibre Partnership Scheme. And of those, most of them are concerned about making sure they tackle it for the rural poverty broadband, the poverty of rural broadband, as well as the closer together areas. So my concern is that as obviously if you've got 429, there's a lot of others as well, that the data that they've all collected that's taken so much time will be lost if the new scheme starts. But I mean, up to the government how much money they top it up to, but we're concerned that Openreach will lose that data or will cancel that data.
We are, as I touched on before, I'm recruiting more individuals in this space to support the communities, and we would see, as I said, have to caveat it with subject to the criteria and the value, but we're continuing as we always would do. The only caveat is around the value of the vouchers that are available for those and the criteria for those schemes. But with the confidence that we hope they will be able to still be able to access the vouchers for whatever value they are, we would be continuing as usual.
Now, I noticed in all the paperwork, it talks about Area 3 being covered,
yes,
but not Area 2. Is any of Hampshire in Area 2?
So again, it's down to the criteria that will be set by BDUK DCMS around the criteria for the new vouchers. We do suspect that Area 2 may not be able to benefit from vouchers, which is why we put a great amount of focus on progressing those Area 2 schemes that were, within the scheme had already made a lot of effort, and we made a great focus on pushing those schemes through to DCMS with the funding applications. So they've got an opportunity to pledge by the end of March, which is when the current voucher scheme ends. I can't give any certainty.
If you're Area 2, will you know that already?
So yes, we would know we would know based on today whether something is Area 2 or Area 3. But again, I don't know whether that is the criteria that the vouchers will be applicable. But we suspect Area 2 will. There is a risk that they will not feature in the new schemes going forward.
In the current schemes, although it's been a community scheme, you had to have at least 2 people or 2 households. Actually, in reality, Openreach has not accepted schemes of 10 houses and less. Is that going to change? Because going back to Councillor Oppenheimer's point, the truly rural that have got the true poor broadband at the moment, for whom this was originally designed, are struggling to find the number of households. So is there anything that Openreach can do? Is that part of the outside-in conversation? Is that how do we get to those households? Many of them are farms and as I say, rural IT property.
So we did put a requirement of 10 purely because of the volume that was coming in for, in some cases, the same locations. So it was trying to, draw together and get the optimum schemes. But obviously there will be cases where 10 won't be possible. So I would say in those circumstances, if that is the case, then by all means we can see whether there is something we can do by exception on those cases. I would say that many of them will be those that will benefit from an outside-in approach. And sometimes the challenge by having an individual premise on their own is that it is very expensive. So we do say it's a minimum of 2, because that is the minimum from a community fibre partnership scheme. Sometimes it can be more expensive when you're only going to 2 properties, which is why we do try and encourage there to be more. But obviously, in some cases where that absolutely isn't possible, then yes, we're more than happy for those to be raised to us, and we can look at what the options are.
Thank you. And the other one was that we have communities that have made approaches through the fibre partnership process, but they haven't necessarily got the answer to the question they'd asked. So if they ask, this is the area we want covered, but you've come back with something much more complicated or much larger, and that's been a consistent problem. Now, in many cases, they've acknowledged that they've not necessarily chosen the most cost-effective extra area to go to. Is there anything that you can do? Is there a lesson learned through this process to realise that the simplicity of offer means that you close the deal more quickly?
So I think one of the challenges that we face is if we get a list of addresses, so which quite often we do, and then if you just looked at going to, let's just say 10 properties, but you're going to pass 100 on the way, you're going to have the whole cost apportioned to 10. So what we try and do is, if we are passing properties on the way that could be picked up as part of the scheme, and therefore you could utilise those vouchers, and obviously then make it much more achievable as a community, we will try and do that. So what we will do is give the optimum scheme. Now there are, some communities will come back and say, no, I don't want that. But then there is the balance between, okay, if you restrict it to the properties that you have asked for, then your price per premise may not be achievable. So I would say that there is probably something around how that's communicated, and acknowledge kind of your feedback on that, and we'll certainly take that forward. But we do try to explain that with a follow-up call to the communities to say that in some instances, the 10 properties you've given us, by the pure design of our network, will as a consequence serve 50, because they're all served from the same network. And then in others we'll say it's because we are passing these on the way, and therefore to give kind of the best option for the scheme to be viable, we will provide the most the optimum solution, which at a price per premise level. My feedback on that is really the emails going backwards and forwards could be solved in about 5 minutes on a phone call, or even a Teams call. So I would suggest that that's something that's worthwhile. The last question is that you mentioned that you're looking at a different funding process, because at the moment some organisations are having, some bids are having to build companies effectively to buy and sell this. And you said you were going effectively to a GoFundMe page to be able to pledge your voucher. Will that be for every one of these schemes, or just some of them, or how is the purchasing structure through the fibre partnership? So where a demand-led approach works is where we can see that based on the gap funding, so the amount that the gap funding after Openreach's contribution, that we can see that there is a decent level of vouchers available within the community to cover that gap, plus some extra. So we do say it's 130% of the gap funding. So if we can see that there is 130% of homes and businesses, businesses and homes that could pledge to the value of 130%. And as I said, the 30% is because we don't actually draw down any of those funds until after all of the works has been completed and they have taken a service. Yeah. So there is a time delay by which we obviously are funding the build. So that 30% allows for change of circumstances during that time. So it has to be where we can see that the voucher value can cover the full gap cost plus some contingency. But if there isn't that, and a community decides they still want to go ahead, because we have got communities where they've realised that actually they need to do that for the whole community, is there still the possibility of doing it through the business, setting up the company in order to... So through it, we do have to contract with a legal entity because it is a contract, a contracting piece. But yeah, we would work with them.
In many cases, it's a parish council.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got some great examples of parish and community councils that have taken forward really successfully. I think there's actually not long ago there was a community council that received an award for leading their scheme through a partnership.
Thank you. That's really helpful to have that clarity. I think the communities will really appreciate that. Thank you.
And before I bring in, thank you all. Before I bring in Councillor Carew, Jackie, thank you very much for those questions. It was an interesting, let's say, trail that we've been on with you. And thank you, Connie, for the way you replied, because I actually found your answers very helpful.
Very helpful indeed. Thank you.
Councillor Carew.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry to be parochial, but you mentioned Borden, and I was just anxious to hear whether you include in Borden also Whitehill and Linford, which are the other constituent parts of my county division, particularly as you know those parts are just as important, and whether it is that you're focusing just on the new housing, or whether you're also going to be looking at retrofitting to existing housing, because I think that's going to be just as important in many cases.
So,
and Connie, in replying, if you could, let's say, make it not quite so focused, okay?
So when we've announced our kind of commercial build programme, we're building at an exchange level. That is because it makes sense to avoid leaving some people unserved, some people served on. We'd look at a whole exchange approach. So we've taken exchanges. So without knowing the detail off the top of my head, I'd have to check to see whether the communities that you talked about were served from an alternate exchange. Sometimes you do find that some communities will be served by multiple exchanges and they can be split in the middle, which when we talk about then kind of the network architecture, it's important that we consider premises that are served from the same network. So I can certainly take that away unless Steve knows in the background. I don't know, I see him busy beavering away, you might be checking that out. But what I can also say is available on our website, there is, and I can send you the link, there is an option where you can choose your location and it will indicate on a map the exchange boundary, so people can see, you know, whether they would be covered. Now, under our rural programmes, what we've said is we're committed to getting to 75%. So we're striving to get to 75% of an exchange to be upgraded fully to ultra-fast fibre without the need for any public subsidy. Now, we are finding in some areas we're getting to 90%, but it really does depend on, you know, how efficient we can be in our build and how you know and how that build actually works in practice. But again, we'll look to perhaps when times offer opportunities for people to come out and see that build happening in your constituency if it's useful. The point around new sites, I think the question was, are we just doing new sites and are we doing retrofit? So in terms of new sites, we're really keen to work with every builder, small and medium, large. We talked about a rate card. The rate card is available for any builder that is building less than 20 plots. So if there is any developer building 20 plots or more, Openreach will offer full fibre for free. The important point is that they register with us, okay, and they register with us at the earliest possibility, because if we're doing infrastructure, we've got to do it at the same time as all of the other key infrastructure. So that's a key point, that we work with all of the developers on 20 or more plots, and we offer that for free. Then when we have a developer that is looking at less than 20 plots, we ask for a contribution. And the contribution depends on the plot size that they're building, and it's completely transparent. It's available on the Openreach website. It is a rate card. So, for example, it could be £20 contribution per plot by the developer, and obviously that to give a sense. I think on the top of my head, I don't want to say something wrong. I'll send the link out for you to have a look, but there is a maximum, obviously, that they will contribute towards the cost of the full fibre if it's less than 20 plots. So again, it's really important that we try and work with those smaller developments to encourage them to take up full fibre. And then your final question was around kind of retrofitting, so those schemes or those new site developments that haven't benefited from full fibre when they were first built. So I think if I reflect, actually, it's one of the areas we've really focused on in the last 12 months, largely because during the pandemic, we've been able to go back and a number of new sites, what we call retro new sites, and we have been able to go back and retrofit with full fibre, so upgrade new sites for full fibre, and that's been happening over the last 12 months. With some of the pandemic restrictions, it's allowed us to continue to build full fibre in those areas. So to your point, yes, we have been going back and doing that, but obviously, you know, there is still you know, that commercial price point in that we can do it without any subsidy.
Adam?
Thank you, that's incredibly helpful. I am standing down as a county councillor due to personal circumstances. So if you could get your information about Whitehall and Borden back to Louise Pickford, and I shall still be a district councillor. So if she can wing that over to me before May, or if not after May, to my district address, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
I was going to mention that, actually, that any communication with regards to information such as links, etc., Connie, do it through Louise, as I said. And if there's a sort of general interest in the reply, that can be copied to everybody. If it's very specific to one person's wanting to know about a specific village or a street, I can understand that being kept, you know, limited. But if you can embroider that to let's say a wider area, then that can go to all of us. It's the general principle that we're interested in. Okay.
Chairman, before you carry on, we seem to have lost your video, or I've seemed to have lost your video. So I just wondered if you could toggle.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going off and I'm coming back on again.
That's it. You're showing now. Thank you.
I've obviously got lousy broadband. Right. Okay. Now, that appears to have exhausted the questions and possibly debate. I'm going to ask a catch-all, Jackie Porter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've got one back to the county council, really, having asked the questions of Openreach, which I really appreciated those answers. It's very helpful. Which was that we had £1 million fund set aside for the Gigabit top-up scheme. We have alluded to this before and assumed that it's going to be continuing, realising that council budgets are very tight, but it has a percentage of that unspent. Do we know how much of that is unspent, or is that commercially sensitive in this case?
Thank you. At the moment, what would I say? So we have a figure in mind at the moment for how much of that has been spent. There are still some more schemes to come through the pipeline. So the Department for Culture, Digital, Culture, Media and Sport administers the scheme, and they provide us with monthly statements. The last statement we had was for the end of February. They've issued an interim one for just now, actually, for really to bring it up to date. But of course, we're really looking at what's going to happen because of the 19th of February deadline. There's still a significant number. I think the figure that they gave us was that because this deadline has generated a 7-fold increase in the activity of voucher scheme registrations. So we've got 26 schemes that we officially know of registered back to us from DCMS, but I'm aware that there are going to be more that come through during the February to March period. So we won't know whether there's any funding left at all until early to late April.
So we need as councillors to lobby for more into that fund. And the second question was really tying up with that. We discussed earlier about Area 2 and Area 3. How much of Hampshire is actually Area 2 and how much is Area 3?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that currently. We're looking to do some research into it. I would say that Area 2 and Area 3, Area 1, 2 and 3 are defined by Ofcom down to postcode sector level. So it's SO23-8, for instance. It's not just SO23. So it is reasonably granular, but it's not as granular as perhaps we'd all like. And in general terms, you know, an Area 2 would be, an Area 1 might be Southampton, and an Area 2 might be somewhere like Romsey. So it's, you know, I think for most of our requirements, Area 3 is going to be absolutely fine, but there may be a few fringe projects where there's a combination of Area 2 and Area 3 together, and we may only be able to draw down funding for Area 3. So
it will be complicated if there are areas which include both areas, or because we know that a postcode isn't actually granular enough, is it?
Well, postcode's pretty good, provided it's the right side of the boundary for us. So that's
okay.
I think
that's another debate.
I think it's perfectly feasible for us to be able to work with a mixed economy, but we'll just know that we can only draw down funding for those that are in classification Area 3, and we'll just know that the Area 2 areas will either have to make a financial contribution on a household basis themselves, or we have to get enough people in the Area 3 list that are eligible, and we talked about this sort of 60% take-up rate of vouchers. We might need to really try and push that so that we get to 80 or 90% take-up of those vouchers, so that it funds the whole scheme.
But we would expect the Hampshire's top-up scheme to reflect the government's scheme precisely.
Yes, to date, that's what we've done, and it makes it very simple to administer, and the fewer hurdles and the fewer additional difficulties we add, probably the better it is for everybody, I think.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
That's an interesting comment, Jackie. Forgive me for being a bit thick on this, but if we're talking about, were we talking about more money being given to the IT department to help out with progressing their work? Is that what we're talking about?
More money for the so the government have got to decide how much money they're placing into this scheme going forward and how much the voucher is per household. But the county council have a matching scheme, the Gigabit scheme, and they give money for certain schemes that need a top up, which means that it makes it more economically viable to include more rural area, perhaps more people in it that wouldn't normally sign up at first glance. Okay. So the potential, if there are Area 2 schemes, and I would say Eastleigh's one, there's a potential where it would be an Area 2 scheme. So if there was somebody that wasn't in the original scheme, in the new scheme, they won't be eligible to go in for it and get a top up. And I was asking if Hampshire's scheme currently tops up to the same sort of scheme. It does mean that Hampshire's money might have run out by April, and we'll need to request more money to go into our top up scheme.
Right, going on to you now. Thank you. That's very helpful, Jackie. Going on to you now again. I presume you have a process whereby you do that. You apply for more money. I presume you do it internally with the treasurer. Is that how it's done?
Yes, I would defer to Councillor Reid and others about that, and Patrick, because that's a policy decision that I can't really comment on. Probably best I don't.
The budget's a decision.
Okay, so go on, Patrick.
Do you want me to come in there, Chairman? I mean, we've talked about what happens to the new voucher scheme if and when it comes into being, and there's every expectation it will come into being. The difficulty we have in looking at budget terms is we just don't know what that scheme is going to look like yet. We know that government have announced that it should come into being from April, as Glenn said in his presentation. I think Connie's mentioned that as well. But But to date, we just don't know what amount the government will put in by way of contribution per premise and per small medium enterprise. So it's very difficult for us to try and plan on how or when it needs to be topped up, if at all. And therefore, we've sort of waited and watched for that. I suppose the second part of that is whether there would be any residual money left over from the existing scheme. I think, as Glenn mentioned, we've seen huge take-up in the latter months of that scheme, and it's quite conceivable that all of that £1 million will be spent, but there may be some left over, but I wouldn't expect there to be huge amounts of that left over.
Okay, my comment is we are a scrutiny committee, and although, as we have done today, we're there to ask us all the questions that we can think of in the world, whether they're critically friendly or not. Our job is also to support the work of our officers. So my suggestion would be that we would like to hear from you again if you are in a position where you are pressed for funds and you would like our support. And if you can convince us that it's a good idea, then that's a recommendation we can make to Cabinet, or certainly the executive member. Is everybody in agreement with that as a principle?
Definitely. Councillor Reid's here, I think.
Councillor Reid.
Yes, I think that's very sensible, Jonathan. Obviously, the officers can't answer and say, yeah, the council's going to put an extra £1 million in here or there. But I think I would pick up accurately the feeling of members that this is something we want to see pursued through to a conclusion. So now obviously times are tight at the moment, but I pick up that members like this. The problem we have, and I just sound a bit of a note of caution, I always say this to the officers, it isn't our statutory obligation to make broadband spread across the whole of Hampshire. We're just trying to help. And the danger is that by trying to help, we make it our fault. And we've just got to be very careful that we remember that, and especially when the officers are struggling to spend the money as well as they can, that we're just trying to do the best we can to help this to happen.
I understand. And I realise that we're not funding non-statutory duties at the moment. I think we all understand that. Let's leave that as an open invitation to the IT department to come back to us with your blessing, Councillor Reid. Let's say, if we can help convince the Cabinet that whatever problems are happening in the future, depending on what's coming through from the government, our job is to assess the situation and make recommendations. The Cabinet can basically veto any recommendation we make, but I think we would like to see the situation. And I'm quite certain.
It would certainly strengthen our hand if you've considered it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, right, sure. That's brilliant. Thank you for that. Councillor Porter, is that a legacy hand?
It's a new hand. I'm just going to say that the other point that this scrutiny committee could do is express to the Secretary of State that this is vital to a rural community like this, and we really do want to see this process continuing and this funding continuing.
I'm quite certain our executive member has taken that on board. Would I be right? Stephen.
Sorry.
Would you have taken that? Have you taken that on board? That the comment made by Councillor Porter.
That we would be going to, that we would be lobbying Oliver Dowden to as Secretary of State to make sure that this is a vital service, and there's no way that we're blaming Hampshire. This is a government amount of money that needs to be placed into this to put the UK on the scheme, and particularly Hampshire.
Yes, I agree with that, Jackie. I regard good broadband delivery as essential in a modern house as electricity. And I am gobsmacked when I see houses being sold that still don't have it. And one of the things I'd like to see happen throughout Hampshire is for every district council as a planning authority to put into its local plans that any new development greater than, pick a number, must have fibre to the premises installed.
Well, based on the comment that Connie Dixon has made, which that they're happy to do it for a relatively small fixed fee, we should insist that every house has it.
Well, I think it's the planning process that would enforce that rather than the county council. So we'd have to get the districts to play that game.
All right.
Thank you.
Councillor Collett, on this point, I presume.
Yes, well, just picking up on Stephen's very valid comment that we don't want to get to a situation where it becomes the county council's fault. But his latter comment was really the point I wanted to make about how broadband is an absolutely fundamental utility going forward from here. And I think it needs a dialogue with the planning authorities along the lines that Jackie was just talking about to make sure every new house has this in. How would we feel if a new house was built now without a water supply? We'd be quite outraged, wouldn't we? Yeah. And I think we need to move to that position through the planning process as well as everything we're doing here as soon as we can. So it's a wider dialogue that's needed, clearly.
Does the planning, I know this is what I like about debate, okay, does the planning reform, the current planning reforms, include that as an adjunct? And I wonder.
That's not my understanding, Jonathan. I think that local authorities would have to make a positive decision to put it as a policy in their local plans.
Right, okay. Right, that was interesting. Right, ladies and gentlemen, if we're finished, I'm going to start thanking people, okay? Right, okay. On behalf of us all, I'd like to thank Patrick Blogg and Glenn Peacey for kicking us off, and I'd also like to thank Connie Dixon and Stephen Harris for a fascinating set of answers to our questions and for involving yourselves in our debate. And I would hope that you'd be more than happy to come back and see us when we request your infinite wisdom. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much indeed. We'll just go on to the final thing. You don't have to stay for our work program. We'll probably go through that in about half a minute, he says, in a positive, in a hopeful way. But thank you all very much indeed. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, everyone.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you, everyone.
Right. Item 11, the work programme. You can see it in front of you. My computer's, of course, gone off. I've been through it with a fine-tooth comb. You can see there's quite a lot there. I think between now and May, a lot's going to happen, but we're still, Louise Pickford is still happy to pick up any ideas that you think that this committee should be looking at from, certainly May onwards. And I'll certainly be brought in and to discuss it with her. We'll see what happens after May, and life will go on. But is everybody generally happy with the programme as it stands? There's a deafening silence. That's good news. Right, then I'm happy to propose the work programme as it exists, but I do want to keep hearing from you, even right up until the 5th of May, if required. Right. In case you've got any good ideas, and we'll just take them on board. So we've agreed that, we've noted the recommendations. So, ladies and gentlemen, unless Louise is going to cut in and say you've missed out something important, I would like to thank you all very much once again for a fascinating morning. We can now get on with our lives with whatever we've got to do, and I'm very grateful to you all for all the work you've done in the last 4 years, I've said before, and I wish you a good afternoon.
Well done, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
The webcast.
Thank you, Jonathan.